They said the place had been empty for years. The locals called it the Pine Cabin, half hidden behind a stretch of forgotten logging road that twisted through northern Oregon's backcountry. When I first saw it, I thought it was perfect, rough around the edges but solid, a fixer-upper with a soul. It reminded me of my father's old hunting lodge, the one he built with his own hands before the forest fire took it. Maybe that's why I didn't think twice when the auctioneer's gavel came down. I'd won the bid for less than what I'd paid for my last pickup. The paperwork was straightforward. County deed transfer, property tax clearance, even a title verification. The place was mine. For the first time in years, I felt that rare hum of excitement, the kind that pulls you out of routine and into something new. I'd been a construction foreman most of my life, building other people's dreams. This cabin would be mine. The road up was rough. The map said Service Route 82, but it was more like a scar carved through pine needles and gravel. I remember the crunch under my tires, the smell of sap thick in the air, and that faint high whistle of wind that only mountains make. When I finally broke through the tree line, I saw it. A 2-story log cabin standing against the dusk, roof sagging slightly, windows clouded with dust. A place waiting for life again. I parked, stepped out, and just listened. The forest was quiet in that strange way that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Every sound felt amplified. The distant caw of a crow, the creak of old timber, my boots sinking into the soil. I unlocked the front door. It groaned open, the hinges protesting. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with wood rot and something else, like old smoke trapped in the walls. There was furniture left behind. A dining table, a sagging couch, even a child's drawing pinned to the wall. It looked like someone had left in a hurry years ago. The floorboards moaned underfoot, but the structure felt strong. I remember running my hand along the log beams, thinking, yeah, I can bring this back. That first night, I unrolled my sleeping bag in the living room, too tired to think. I had a portable heater and a thermos of coffee. The cabin's silence felt thick, almost comforting. Outside, the wind scraped through branches, and I thought of how quiet my life had been lately. Too quiet. Maybe this was what I needed. A project, a purpose. But somewhere past midnight, I woke to a sound I couldn't explain. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal either. It was the muffled thump of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. For a moment, I just lay there, heart pounding, staring into the dark. My mind tried to rationalize it. Wood settling, raccoons in the attic, maybe even the heater crackling. But then I heard it again, a floorboard creak, followed by the faint shuffle of movement. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the staircase. The beam cut through the dark, revealing floating dust and cobwebs, but nothing else. I called out, half expecting an echo. Nothing. After a minute, I told myself it was just the house breathing again after years of neglect. Morning light came slow through the trees. I stepped outside to clear my head. The forest glistened with dew, but something caught my eye near the porch, the faint imprint of shoe soles in the damp earth. Not boots. Not my size either. Smaller, narrower, like a woman's or a teenager's. That should have been my warning. The next day, I started clearing the debris. Broken chairs, shattered glass, scraps of newspaper dated 2015. As I worked, I noticed small details that didn't make sense. A fresh coffee mug on the counter, a damp towel hanging near the sink, the faint smell of soap. It was like the place wasn't abandoned at all, just recently lived in. Around noon, I decided to check the basement. The door was half hidden behind a torn curtain. When I pulled it open, a rush of cold air spilled out. My flashlight beam caught on something metallic. Cans, tools, stacked boxes. But one corner was different. There was a cot, a blanket, a plastic crate filled with groceries, and a lantern still warm to the touch. Someone had been here, maybe still was. I felt that prickle on the back of my neck, the kind that tells you you're not alone. I backed up the stairs, careful not to make a sound. Outside, I scanned the tree line. Everything looked still. Then, behind the shed, I saw it. Smoke. A thin column curling into the cold air. I followed it quietly, each step slower than the last. Behind the cabin, maybe 50 feet out, was an old fire pit. Around it, half-eaten food, a cooking pan, and a child's backpack with the name Emily written in marker. My stomach sank. Whoever they weren't just passing through. They were living here. I called the county office that afternoon, explained the situation. They said the deed was clean, that no tenants were registered. Probably squatters, the clerk told me. Just call the sheriff if they come back. That night I waited. No heater, no lights, just the soft hum of my truck battery charging my phone. Around 1 a.m. it happened again. The sound of the door creaking open, whispered voices, a faint laugh. I held my breath and listened as footsteps crossed the floor above me. Then a shadow moved past the window, tall, male, carrying a lantern. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. When I finally mustered the courage to look again, the light was gone. Only the sound of rain hitting the roof remained. I barely slept, waiting for morning. When daylight came, I stepped outside, exhausted, heart still racing. And there they were, a family. A man, a woman, and 2 kids standing on the porch like they owned it. The woman held a mug of coffee, steam curling up into the crisp mountain air. The man looked at me with the kind of stare that dares you to speak first. The little girl clutched a stuffed bear, and the woman smiled. Polite, almost casual. "Good morning," she said. "You're on our property." The words hit like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, but something about their calm, practiced confidence froze me. Like they'd done this before, like they believed it. That's when I realized something was very wrong with this family in the woods. They looked ordinary. That was the first thing that struck me. The man wore a flannel shirt and jeans, the kind you buy at any small-town hardware store. His hands were rough, the kind that knew work. The woman, mid-40s, hair tied back, eyes sharp but unreadable, stood like someone used to being obeyed. The kids hovered behind her, a teenage boy in a faded hoodie, and a little girl gripping her bear so tight its fur was matted flat. It should have been a simple conversation. A misunderstanding. I owned the deed. They were trespassing. But the way they stood there, silent, steady, watching me instead of looking nervous, that made my stomach twist. "I bought this cabin at auction," I said finally. "It's mine now." The man's face didn't move. The woman just tilted her head slightly, like I'd said something amusing. "That's interesting," she said, voice soft, but with an edge that made every word feel like a test. "Because this land's been in our family for generations." She gestured to the trees, to the roofline, to the forest that surrounded us. "You must be mistaken." The words were so casual it almost worked. For a second I doubted myself. But no, my paperwork was solid. I had the deed in my truck. I stepped closer. "Look, I don't want trouble, but the county records show this property was foreclosed 3 years ago. I bought it legally." Her expression didn't change. "You'll have to take that up with the land association," she said, as if reading from a script. "Land association?" The man spoke for the first time. His voice was low, almost tired. "There's a charter here. You can't just move in and claim things. Not without approval. Approval." That word stuck. "Approval from who?" Behind them, smoke still drifted from the chimney. My chimney. Through the open door, I saw something new. Blankets neatly folded, dishes washed, photos on the mantel. They weren't just squatting. They'd moved in. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "I'm going to the sheriff," I said, stepping back toward my truck. The woman smiled, not kind, not mocking, but something between. "You do that," she said softly. "Just know he's one of ours. One of ours." I left before I said something stupid. The drive to town felt longer than before. The radio didn't work this far up, and the silence pressed hard. When I reached the sheriff's office, a squat brick building near the gas station, the air inside smelled of coffee and dust. The deputy on duty, Miller, listened as I explained. He nodded, took notes, then sighed. "Ah, the Thatchers," he said. "Yeah, they've been around a while. They're living in my cabin." He leaned back, rubbing his chin. "They claim it's theirs. You know how it goes. Mountain folks, old family land, paperwork gets muddy." "Muddy?" "I've got the deed." He looked at me like that didn't matter. "Let me make a few calls. But if I were you, I'd stay clear until we sort it out. No sense in stirring things, that was it. No patrol, no escort." Just a shrug. I walked out feeling smaller than when I went in. Back at the cabin, dusk had already settled. The windows glowed from inside, yellow and warm. Laughter drifted out, the kind of laughter that comes from people comfortable in their own home. My home. I stood by the tree line, watching through the shadows. The boy sat near the fire, tossing popcorn into his sister's mouth. The man strummed a guitar. The woman moved through the kitchen, humming. It looked like a family out of an old photograph. Everything too normal, too placed. Then something caught my eye. On the wall above the fireplace, hanging where the child's drawing used to be, was a framed photo. 4 faces, those same 4, except it wasn't recent. The paper looked old, the edges curled and yellowed. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. I backed away quietly, returned to my truck, and locked the doors. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces lit by that flickering fire, smiling like they belonged there. Like they'd always belonged there. The next morning, I drove to the county records office. The clerk, a young guy named Jordan, pulled up the files. When I asked about the Thatchers, he frowned. "Doesn't show any active ownership," he said. "Last registered owner was a Harold Denton. Deed transferred to bank foreclosure, then auctioned. You. Then who are they?" He shrugged. "Locals talk. That family used to own land up there decades ago, before the fire in 2003. Some people say they never left." "Never left?" He laughed awkwardly. "You know, ghost stories. Cabin people. Don't take it seriously. But I did. I drove back that evening, determined to make them leave. As the forest swallowed the road, fog rolled in thick and low, turning the pines into tall, black silhouettes. By the time I reached the clearing, the cabin lights were off. No sound, no smoke, nothing. Inside, the place was empty. Blankets gone. Dishes gone. Photos gone. Like they'd never existed. The air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and wood ash. On the table sat one thing, a folded note. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned cursive. "This land remembers its own." I stood there staring at it until the silence became unbearable. Then from somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Slow, heavy, deliberate. I lifted my flashlight. The beam hit the staircase, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw the little girl standing halfway up, her eyes wide and unblinking. Then she turned and disappeared into the dark. The air went cold, the kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. I backed out of the cabin, heart hammering, breath fogging in the night. I didn't stop until I was inside the truck with the doors locked and the engine running. Through the windshield, I watched the windows of the cabin glow faintly again, one by one, as if someone was lighting them from inside. Except I knew no one should have been there. That was the night I stopped believing this was just a trespassing case. Something else was happening in that cabin, something older, and I was in far deeper than I understood. The cabin doesn't creak the way it used to. It's quiet now. Too quiet. I still remember that first night after they left. The silence felt like punishment, every corner echoing with their laughter that wasn't mine to begin with. It was strange. I fought so hard to get them out. Yet when they finally were gone, it felt like I'd lost something I never had. I found their little girl's drawing under the floorboard while repairing the place. A stick figure family, standing right in front of this same cabin. She'd written in crooked letters, "Home." I couldn't throw it away. It's still pinned above the fireplace. After the police report and the court paperwork, I learned the truth. They weren't squatters, not in the way I thought. The father had been the original caretaker decades ago. He'd lived here before the land was sold off piece by piece, before my name was ever on the deed. When life broke him down, he brought his family back to the only place that still felt like safety. My cabin, their memory. Sometimes, when the wind hits the trees just right, the boards groan the way they used to when the girl ran across them. And for a second, it almost feels like they're still here. Laughter tangled in the sound of the rain. I don't visit the city much anymore. The noise there feels artificial, hollow. Here, every creak and rustle means something. It reminds me that this place isn't just wood and nails. It's a heartbeat, one that keeps beating long after the people move on. I don't regret buying this cabin, but I do wish I'd listened sooner. Not with my ears, but with something quieter. Because sometimes what we think we're reclaiming was never really lost.